Hi, everyone. This is John Jeffries, President and CEO of Callahan Associates. Welcome to our third edition of Strategy Briefs. I'm joined again with my colleague, Jay Johnson. Hey, Jay.
Hey, John, how are you?
Good. So, our Strategy Brief series is a way that we're helping credit unions think about strategy in short bites in this period we're in. Certainly, a lot of uncertainty that the credit unions are facing, and we certainly believe that having strategic conversation is critical, and making sure that we're thinking about this evolving situation carefully with our teams and our boards and stakeholders is important. And that's really what these strategy briefs are about, is the insights we're hearing from the market, some of the questions we're hearing leaders ask, and sharing that with the broader group. So, Jay, I thought today maybe we'd start with sort of a story that I heard, and as a way one leader has been explaining the situation to their team. And the way they described it was, it's sort of like we're on one of those old wooden roller coasters, right? And the person that told me was really descriptive in sort of the way they did it. If you think about the way up, there's the clank, right? The part of the sound is part of the drama they have with this. So it feels like we're on the way up, right? And by way up, I really mean, how bad is the economic impact going to be? We know there's going to be some, but with loan forbearances and deferments, we really haven't seen the delinquency and charge-offs hit yet, right? So we know we're on the way up. We hear the clank, clank, clank. But the part we don't know is, are we on like the kiddie coaster? Or are we at Six Flags and we're going to hit the double black diamond with two twists and a turn, right? What type of roller coaster is this? So I think that leads to, given the uncertainty we're facing and unsure about what the environment looks like, how might you think about making decisions and thinking about this environment as you talk with your teams and your boards?
I mean, it really is obviously just an unprecedented situation, John, and there's so much going on around us externally, but internally as well. I mean, organizations have had to pivot so quickly. So it really is an unprecedented time. I learned something interesting this week. I learned that the root of crisis, the word crisis, is to decide.
Hmm.
So it is all about decision making, right? And as you said, we don't know kind of how this is all going to play out, how severe, what the ramifications are going to be, whether you think of it from the credit union standpoint, the member, the economy, et cetera. But I think as credit unions navigate through this, you've got both short-term decisions to make and longer-term decisions to make. And again, if the root of that is to decide, decisions are about that, it may be difficult to have the same people deciding both the short-term and the longer term. And so, we've heard from a couple of credit unions that have separated out a team that's continuing just to focus on the longer term. And I think that could be an important part of this. But another way to think about it is, as you said, the roller coaster is probably a good analogy here. We don't know when that's going to turn, what's going to come after that, et cetera. So another way to think about it would be, do you set up a team that's just thinking about the end of that, after you come out of that loop-de-loop or whatever you have, and maybe starts asking questions and thinking through the range of outcomes that would be there. So, obviously we've seen a lot of changes in the work environment, in consumer behavior, other things the last couple of months. Maybe you have a team that's starting to think about, okay, as this starts to normalize, or as you come out of the loop in the roller coaster analogy, how do we be sure that we're ready to respond as quickly as possible? And maybe that means just evaluating, okay, these changes that we're seeing, how many of those do we think are going to be permanent? How many of those, as we come out of this, might either accelerate change or slow change in some of these areas? And then ultimately, from the credit union standpoint, Are there opportunities that we maybe see coming out of this? If so, how do we ensure that we accelerate towards that? Or are there potential threats on the other end? And if so, how do we mitigate that? But if, it may be helpful to have a smaller group thinking about those types of questions and really thinking about how can we move quickly as you get more clarity, as that roller coaster starts to smooth out some.
Yeah, Jay, I think those are really good insights around how credits might make decisions and balancing the short term, long term. And I think one of the things that we always advise in the work that we do with credits is, making the decisions in context of what you're trying to achieve, right? What does success look like to your credit union? So maybe you could talk a little bit about what you're hearing some leaders think about in terms of how do they think about success? What are they trying to measure? What outcomes they're driving towards, both on the short term, right? Maybe on the members, the employees as an employer, as the credit as a whole, right? How do we ensure that we have a sustainable future here? But then longer term, how do they rethink? One of the phrases that we like to use is being part of the solution. So could you maybe talk about how you're hearing people ask questions or think about how they define success? Because I think as you're making those decisions that you spoke about, sort of having an end goal in mind certainly helps with some of those.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, we've talked in each of these strategy briefs about kind of thinking through your stakeholders, your members, your employees, and even the credit union itself. And maybe you could extend that even to the community, if you'd like. And I think, we are hearing credit unions that are thinking through those lenses. Certainly, I think we've heard at the forefront, members and employees are at the forefront of almost every credit union leader's decisions, being sure that that the decisions we make can help them get through this as best as we can hope. But as we talked about in the last one, you still have to make decisions around each of those, and you still have to weigh each of those, and that includes the credit union itself. As we talked about in the last one, there's financial implications to these decisions, whichever way you go, that impact members, that impact the credit union, potentially employees. So there still needs to be some sort of filter, in a way, as to how you make those decisions and how you arrive at what that scorecard is, like you're saying. And, I think what we've heard from a few credit unions is that what they've started to lean on increasingly in a situation like this is just being sure they're clear on who they are as an organization. Mm-hmm. What's their mission? What's their purpose as they think through the options that they have. You're still going to have to weigh, what does it mean for members? What does it mean for employees? What does it mean to our credit union and the financial profile it might have? But I think those credit unions that seem to be navigating this, I won't necessarily say the best, because we don't know that yet, but certainly I think that seem to have more clarity on their decisions. It's because they keep coming back to that filter of who are we? What are we about? What are we trying to achieve as an organization? And I think for some organizations that maybe didn't have some of that clarity going in some ways, situations like this may actually provide more clarity to that and actually help them define, all right, what are we really about? And what does that mean for the decisions we might make and for what our success really does look like?
Yeah, I think, Jay, one of the things that this environment has caused was leaders to make a whole lot of decisions really quickly that they may have tried to push off, right? Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, talked about the fact that no large organization in the world would have tried a stress test of remote work. They would have rolled it out slowly, but the fact that we're in this, everyone sort of did a real live stress test, and it worked, right? For most organizations. And I think the constraints that have been put on a lot of people, and especially as they make decisions, accelerating some of those conversations around what is our purpose, what does success look like, make some of those decisions you spoke about a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's still, it may be easier, but it's still not easy, right?
Yeah.
These are very complex issues that we're dealing with, and you think about employee impact and work from home. Well, there's cultural things to weigh, and culture is a big part of credit unions. And so, what does that mean? So there are still implications for a lot of this, but I do think that filter and that clarity on understanding who we are as an organization can really underscore those decisions. And we talked a little bit last session about bringing maybe your board along with some of these decisions. If the board understands that, it makes it clearer for everyone.
Yeah. Well, Jay, I think we're out of time. So it sounds like the themes for today are, we're about to go on the down part of the roller coaster, but as we go down, whether we're on the Kiddie Coaster or the Triple Black Diamond, Six Flags Super Coaster, helping make decisions, short term, long term. You suggest the best practice might be splitting teams up, but then a lens or a filter to help make those decisions or give them a little bit more clarity is really focus on and make sure that all your stakeholders are aware of what's your purpose, what's the success look like, and that can sort of make the process a little bit easier.
That's right.
So
that's right.
With that, we appreciate everyone taking time and joining us today, and we look forward to sharing our insight with you on our next Callahan Strategy Brief. Thanks.